Week 5 is in the books. Week 6 around the corner, helping us break it all down as he does each and every single week. Our good friend Jake Crain of Crain Company, who was with me in Tuscaloosa over the weekend. We'll talk that game in just a second. Jake, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
No, man, it's always fun coming on. What a wild weekend. I do want to take a second to all the Kentucky fans. I just want to tell you guys, I was wrong. I was wrong as rain. You know, in this business,
I think you said last week Vanderbilt was better than Kentucky. Is what your exact words?
No, well, I think I said that people, I think people need to keep the same energy for Missouri as they did for Georgia, because Missouri barely held on to beat a Vanderbilt team, and then Georgia barely held on to beat Kentucky, and you can make a case that Vanderbilt is just as good or a little bit better than Kentucky. I just wanted people to keep the same energy for Missouri, which we're going to find out more about them. But, you know, even when I was coaching, man, in Division I, like trying to predict what teams are going to do. I mean, even us, we thought we had a good idea based on the week of practice, right? And where we were injury wise and kind of how our scheme matched up with theirs, like how our team was going to do. But you really never know until you go out there and play the game on Saturday or Thursday or Friday or Monday, whatever. So it's hard enough when you're coaching there, trying to predict what 18 to 22-year-olds do. That's why, man, we used to, when the lines would come out of our games, like I'd look at it and be like, dude, I've been at practice all week. There's no way that this line is going to be right. And then it would be like close to right. So kudos to Kentucky, man. And I'll be the first one to tell you we're way more right than we are wrong. But when I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to tell you. And congrats to them, man. Y'all deserved it.
Yeah, the Cats were impressive. Jake, though, I want to start with the game of the weekend, again, where we were on site in Tuscaloosa. It was great to see you, your brother. Wish we'd have linked up with David Cohn, but we're going to do so in the future. Bubba Sparks. Yeah, I posted that yesterday. I said, yes, this is actually Bubba Sparks. Tuscaloosa was a full motion picture, ladies and gentlemen. I don't ask how or why, just know it happened. That game Saturday specifically, though, I was in the building. You guys were at Innisfree. Shout out to those fine folks, by the way, down in Tuscaloosa. That you guys dropped the clip of the reaction at the end. Pandemonium in the city. Taylor 2 halves. Bama comes out. They're up 30-7 at halftime. Jalen Milroe looks like the next coming of, I don't even know what. Guy looked like he's playing freshman difficulty on EA College Football 25. Georgia storms back in the second half, even takes the lead near the end of the game. Then the big play by Ryan Williams, who I saw you say he's a witch. He's a wizard. I don't know what he is. He's not human is what he is. And then people almost forget, Jake, Georgia's down there with a shot to win it. And I thought they made the right play, and give Bama credit. The freshman comes up with the pick. Game turns into an instant classic. Thoughts, takeaways, what are your words after witnessing that ball game?
You know, that was one of the best games I've ever seen. Obviously, being there at Innisfree and feeling the air shift in there when Alabama was dominating to when Georgia, fought back and took the lead. It was just shocking to me, because that was the weirdest track meet that you'll ever see, because it was like half a track meet, right? It wasn't like in the first half that Georgia was just busting coverages and fluky stuff was happening and there was a block punt. Alabama was lining up and whipping their ass. I mean, Alabama was better everywhere. Everything was working. Really, the only thing that didn't work for Bama the first half was the 2 trick plays they ran. Everything else was working. The run game, Jalen Milroe was 11 for 11 at one point. He was making the right decision. Even the interception he threw, I thought it was the right choice, and he tried to put the ball a little bit behind the guy because there was pressure coming in front of him. And typically, that's a ball I'm sure the receiver would tell you should have caught. But it was dominance. It was like watching that happen to Georgia. It was like watching what Georgia has been doing to other people. You just don't see it a lot with the amount of personnel. And I know this isn't the best Georgia team that they've had over the past 3 years, but just watching the utter domination on the line of scrimmage on both sides, watching one quarterback compared to the other, it was like Carson Beck had never played in a big game before. And then in the second half, I really believe, Chris, that for Georgia fans, yeah, you lost the game. There are no moral victories, but you found a way to hit explosive plays. And I think going up tempo is something you're going to see Georgia do more of. I think it took the thinking out of it for Carson Beck. Not that you're going to go up tempo all the time. You're not going to turn into Tennessee. But if you get in a rut, I think you're going to see Georgia start going fast a little bit, because that's what worked. To me, that's when everything changed. It put Alabama on their heels on defense. Georgia was just lining up and running plays. Now, they did get like 6 fourth-down conversions, which is absolutely insane. But I'm wondering how much up-tempo you're going to see from Georgia here on out. We questioned the Bulldogs' ability to hit big plays, and for a half and half a quarter, that was the problem. And then that spark hit when they started going up tempo, and you can get some confidence out of it. But what I want to say about Alabama is, people are like, oh, well, you gave up this big lead. Is Alabama really this dominant team that we saw in the first half? It's one type of mental toughness to go out there and dominate like that early and then step on the throat and kill the team. It's a totally different type of mental toughness and maturity to blow that big lead in a big game and then answer right back and hold on to win that game. I think it actually takes more mental toughness to come back like that than it does to just cruise on to the sunset and win a blowout. So I think that says more about the maturity and the culture and the leadership that is carried over from the Nick Saban era to the Kalen DeBoer era. And that's why I came on here and said all offseason, I think Jalen Milroe's biggest contribution will be a leader off the field first and then on the field. There was no panic. And when it came time to make the big play at the end, he went to the guy that he trusts the most. They were really in man free. That's what it looked like. And the safety was shaded over to where Ryan Williams was pre-snap. Now, the safety never got deep enough in the sky, right, and never was able to get over there. And Jalen Milroe still threw it to Ryan Williams. So if there's any question about who Jalen Milroe is going to throw that ball up to when it matters the most, that got answered, and he threw it to the 14-year-old, mutant Ryan Williams. So if I'm an Alabama fan, yeah, I wish we could have held on to a big lead and rode off into the sunset. But I'm feeling even better about the mental fortitude of my team going forward after you relinquish that lead and then get it back.
Jake, so much of the conversation after this game has been, and deservedly so, Alabama now number 1 in the AP poll. Are they the best team in college football? Do they deserve the number 1 ranking? Is Jalen Milroe the best player in the country, best college football player in the country? I want to shift gears, though, and get your thoughts on Georgia after this. Because, again, tale of two halves. I mean, Jake, I was right there. I was in the end zone where Carson Beck, it wasn't the screen, it was the other pick where I'm looking down the line of sight. Man, he was seeing ghosts. I mean, because there wasn't nobody. I mean, I'm like, you threw it right to the guy. It's like you meant to do it. Like, was seeing ghosts. Bounces back in the second half. That entire Georgia team made the adjustments. What do you think about Georgia leaving this game? Again, all the attention's been on Bama. Are they the best team in college football? And you can discuss that if you want, but what's the thought process on Georgia now? Because, again, tale of two halves, and they've got a really difficult schedule still ahead.
Yeah, the goal, obviously, everything you want is still out in front of you. I mean, if you run the table the rest of the way, there's a good chance you'll probably see Alabama again in the SEC championship if all goes according to plan, because there's no divisions. But again, I go back to kind of what I was talking about, the team with Georgia with Carson Beck. Like, if you're a Georgia fan, I mean, we had some people in the chat that were like, bench this guy during the live stream. He found something. And I think Georgia fans found something. There's still questions about Carson Beck, right? After last year, not making the playoff, after winning 2 straight national championships, can you be a guy that when it's time to nut up, you can go out there and get the job done? I think you should have more confidence in Carson Beck now than you did before that game, even with the rough stretch that he had, because he could have shut it down. He could have said, you know what, it's not my night. Kirby could have gone to the backup, and people would have justified it, and I don't think they would be crazily wrong. But I think Georgia's still a top 5 team. The problem now becomes what you said, the rest of this schedule, right? 9-3 is not getting you in, even if you're Georgia, especially if Notre Dame ends up going 11-1, which I don't think they will, but I don't think 9-3 gets you in. So you got to get to that 10-2 mark. A 10-2 Georgia gets in. So you basically got one more loss, right? But when you look at now Ole Miss, who's got to really thread the needle after losing to Kentucky, you play them on the road. Then you got to play Texas, right? Then you get to play Tennessee at home. You have got to finish 10-2. But I think this team still can, right? As far as I got them still in the top 5. I got them at number 5 right now. I don't think it's time to panic or that Georgia's some average team. But now the focus really has to narrow. and you've got to be damn near perfect coming down what is a brutal stretch. But the good news is you get the slump buster this weekend. Auburn comes to town. You want to feel good about yourself? Play Auburn. They'll blow it. Like, even if they play good, just let them. Give them time. They'll blow it. So if you're Georgia, you get Auburn, which is a rivalry game. You schedule them for homecoming, and now you know why. So you should be feeling better about yourself going forward after this weekend. Get Carson Beck some more confidence. Continue to hit explosive plays and give the Oscar Delps, right? Dylan Bells, Dominic Lovett, those guys a chance to continue to grow with Carson. But yeah, the margin for error is very, very slim for Georgia right now. But if you go 10-2 the rest of the way, you're still in. You're going to get your shot. Now, look, you could go 10-2, Chris, and not make the SEC championship and still get in. There's a decent chance that could happen. So Georgia's not done by any means. I still think they're a top 5 team in the country. And that second half may have saved their season just from a mentality standpoint of, yeah, you lost, but like Drake said, you know it's real when you are who you thought you were.
Getting off to quicker starts certainly will be a focus for Georgia as they've got Auburn coming to town. We'll talk about that one more in a second. You mentioned Kentucky, the shocker of the weekend, and maybe the shocker to this point, Jake, in the college football season. I mean, I don't think anybody out there was picking Kentucky to go into Ole Miss, beat the Rebels. That's exactly what happens. Again, you mentioned Kentucky. Let's give them their praise, but Jake, what do you make of Ole Miss, man? I mean, I think I saw a thumbnail from you guys that just had the word frauds on it. So is that what you put do you put the fraud label on Ole Miss right now? I mean, what do you make of the Rebels?
I don't yet. This weekend is going to tell the tale. I put something out on social media yesterday, even after our show on Crain Company, saying why I'm not giving up on Ole Miss just yet. But, you talk about the margin for error shortening, as I mentioned, with Georgia and having to thread the needle. But first, before you say anything about Ole Miss, Kentucky won that game. There was nothing fluky about that game. Kentucky had a narrow path to win it. They had to muck it up, make it clunky, make it ugly, and give themselves a chance in the fourth quarter. And that's what they did. Mark Stoops being able to get that team back to playing, their style, their grinded out type of game after playing Georgia and getting your heart broke at home, right? After getting embarrassed on the road at South Carolina, just shows you his grip on that team and their ability to put the past in the past and move forward. So you got to give all the credit to Kentucky. But Ole Miss was unprepared. I don't know how you watch that game, whether you're an Ole Miss fan, whether you're a Kentucky fan, whether you're a Texas Tech fan or a Vikings fan, and not think that Ole Miss was unprepared. And it blows my mind, Chris, because this was the team, and still can be, that was anointed to take that next step. Right, last year, you were very successful. You returned a lot of people. You plugged up holes on the ship in the transfer portal. And this is the team that was supposed to get Ole Miss over that hump. Yet, you've never won the SEC. Hell, you hadn't even played in the game, the SEC championship game. This is the team that was supposed to do it. So to overlook anyone is arrogance beyond belief. And that falls on Lane Kiffin. He's spending time during the week talking about Hugh Freeze and Auburn. Dude, this is about Kentucky. What are you doing? You haven't earned the right to do that. You really haven't won anything either. In fact, you faltered in pretty much every big moment that you have had. That's one of the few black marks on his resume as he's risen up through the ranks and become a household name in college football. And he's worked under Nick Saban. He understands it's a faceless opponent. The great teams don't care if they're playing Kentucky, Kentucky State, Kentucky Bourbon, or whatever. It's about you. Yes, you adjust the scheme to fit who you're playing. You got to know who the playmakers are. You got to put the scouting report together. But it's about you playing your best every single weekend and getting better week by week fundamentally from a blocking and tackling and preparation, procedurally, organizationally, and community-wise as a team every single weekend. And to think that you're going to roll your helmet out there and beat Kentucky after you've accomplished nothing as far as championships is a lack of leadership. And I think Lane Kiffin will tell you the same thing deep down. I think he really would. But there's still hope. I think this Ole Miss team can rebound from this. I don't think their season is done. But now it's kill or be killed. You go lose at South Carolina, you're not getting in the playoff. You're just not. Even if you go 10-2 because of that weak schedule early. Chris, we see this in college basketball all the time, right? Teams schedule very, very weak non-conference opponents, win all these games, and then do okay in conference play. And for some reason, it's always Texas A&M. But they're always on the outside when it comes to the bubble watch, right? Because of that strength of schedule. And if Ole Miss does not figure out a way to basically run the table, right? I don't think that they're going to get into the playoff. And it's because you were unprepared and Kentucky took advantage of it. So I don't think this Ole Miss team is fraudulent yet, right? But if you lose this weekend, listen, here's your court date. It's wire fraud, literally.
Yeah, Jay, I was going to say, ironically enough, to the college basketball point, I'm pretty sure Chris Beard's first year in Oxford, that's exactly what happened. They were like 13.
We see it all the time.
They were 13-0 at one point, and then conference play kicked in, and it was like, okay, this is different. Jake, just on a side note, speaking of Lane Kiffin, I want to ask, because you guys talked with our friend Josh Pate weeks ago and asked about Kiffin and the Florida job. Does this change the outlook on would Kiffin be a good fit in Gainesville at all? Does it affect that conversation at all?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think it does at all.
Okay.
It's if you're Lane Kiffin, you want, if you are going to take the Florida job, which anybody, and I love Josh, and Josh has great sources, like I have great sources. I just think anybody that thinks they know exactly what Lane Kiffin is going to do, I think you're making a big assumption. Even the people that are closest to Lane, I think you're making a big assumption. But Lane wants the leverage. Obviously, the better Ole Miss does, the more he can leverage Florida and then Ole Miss, right? It's a win-win. So I don't think if you're Scott Strickland or whoever's making this decision at Florida, you look at them losing to Kentucky and you're like, oh, no, we're going to, like, oh, boy, off Billy Madison, right? Cross him off the list as you're putting lipstick on.
Jake, let's go to the Plains, man. I know you don't want to.
I want to.
I learned, Jake, what Sooner Magic was this weekend. I had never heard of that before, and I had Oklahoma fans in our mentions. That's Sooner Magic, baby. I'm like, what is that? So learned something new. I didn't learn anything new about Peyton Thorne, though, Jake. I kind of knew what I knew, and even when he plays well, he finds a way to blow it. So Oklahoma outscores Auburn 17-7 in the fourth quarter. I'll give you the floor because I can't believe Auburn lost that football game.
I can. I came on here and said it. I went on Locked On Auburn and said it.
You are who I thought you were.
No, Auburn will find a way to lose it. Even if they play well. I think I said those exact words.
You did.
They'll find a way to lose it. It's called pseudodysphagia, Chris. It's the fear of choking. That is the illness that's in the Auburn football program right now. Losers lose, winners win. And you got to give credit to Oklahoma. They found a way to win that game with Hawkins, with the basically triage tent they had at wide receiver. But I think there is and to be honest with you, the only way you fix it is you got to get the old leadership out. The young guys have to take over. And I'm not saying every older guy is like that. I don't think Eugene Asante is like that. I think not like that. I think a couple of them got that dog in it, but Auburn doesn't have enough. And you don't have it at the quarterback position, right? If you're scared of failing too much, a little bit of fear of failure is a good thing, I think. But if you're scared to death and hope that the play doesn't come to you and it doesn't come down to you, you are going to choke. And Auburn finds a different way. It's not just Peyton Thorne. Can't make a 27-yard field goal or a 22-yard field goal, right? You give up huge plays defensively in big moments, even though the defense played really good against Oklahoma, but you go back to the Arkansas game. Auburn finds a way to lose game. It's pseudodysphagia. They're scared to death of prosperity. They're scared to death of the moment, and you're seeing that. And, Chris, that's the hardest thing to get rid of, right? Like it's not that is a, hey, young guys, this can't be us, right? It's like in a family where you got like two kids, the older brother and the younger brother. And the older brother's just a screw up. He's just a screw up. It's like on Breaking Bad. How about that, right? Like Jesse Paul's character, right, is the screw up older brother. And they keep telling the younger brother, hey, watch what he does and do the opposite, right? Don't be like this. That's the only thing I know. And it's on the coaches too. The Auburn's time management and coaching has been below average. It has. And Hugh Freeze got rid of a bunch of guys on staff and said, we're going to get it right. We're going to get it right. And the saddest part is, and I want to go to Peyton Thorne here because it's not just on Peyton Thorne, right? Peyton Thorne, I literally put out a tweet sarcastically saying he may be a plant, like at this point, right? This may be an op. And an Auburn fan was like, he played his best game. How could you say this? And my answer was, Chris, exactly. You played the best game in your Auburn career, and you blew it at the end. In reality, you should have thrown 3 interceptions. He really threw that interception twice, right? Where they walked guys up and then backed them up and baited them into throwing the slant. You did it twice. The one guy just tried to catch it with one hand in the red zone, and you were able to get away with it. This time, you weren't able to get away with it. But if it's like a NASCAR driver, you're leading the race the whole time. You're driving great. You've never gotten close to winning a race. In fact, you barely even finish races. But then that last lap comes, and it's not because you get bumped. It's not because the car falters. You just drive it into the wall and not only lose the race, but don't even finish the race. There's different ways to lose games, and it's not all on Peyton Thorne. But the fact, Chris, and this is the saddest part, and Hugh Freeze, it was a double screw-up. Hugh Freeze, during that 8-minute mark, shouldn't have called 2 RPOs after Jarquez Hunter was ripping their guts out down the field, ripping them apart down the field. That was a horrific call to call an RPO there twice. So that was bad. You should have just called inside zone or zone read. But the fact that you can't trust a guy that has played as much football as Peyton Thorne, your quote-unquote captain, senior quarterback, to understand the situation and say, even if it's there, I don't need to pull it and throw it, is horrifying. It's horrifying. But what I'm worried about, Chris, is in the locker room and at practice. Peyton Thorne has screwed this up so much. How can you ever tell anybody else what to do? If I'm one of these young guys, if I'm Cam Coleman or one of these guys, dog, you're terrible. You're going to tell me what to do and say it, get on to me about something? You can't. Listen, it's different if you're like a walk-on that gets named a captain. You don't really play that much, but in practice you're getting after it and you're on special teams and you know what I'm saying? There's always that guy. It's another thing if you're a captain, you're the quarterback, like a leader at a very important position. You can't just be words on the sideline and I'm a good guy. You got to make plays on the field in the clutch moments. In the clutch moments. I don't know how he can be a captain anymore. I really don't. I really don't. Outside of him just holding a clipboard and telling guys, good job. But Hugh Freeze is in a horrible spot because you didn't get a guy for the portal. You can't do anything about that now. What are you going to do? Send Walker White out there against Georgia on the road in his first game and just throw meat to the Lions? No. So you got to play this guy. And no, Hugh Freeze should not get fired after this year. That's crazy. But the more Auburn struggles this year, the better they're going to have to do next year. And now you've got to go get a quarterback out of the portal. There is no choice. You got to go get one because you're going to hinge your career, right, year 3, on a redshirt freshman that's never played in Walker White and hope that turns out good, even with getting better around him. So I do not envy the position Hugh Freeze is in, but you dug your own grave on this one. You decided to stick with Peyton Thorne. So Auburn fans get mad, like when saying things about Peyton Thorne now because he had some good numbers in that game. And that's the problem, I think, with Auburn. There's sometimes, not everybody, not even most people, but there's this faction that's, I'm not okay and you're not okay, but that's okay. Man, we lost, but we sure did get a lot of yards. Man, we crashed the car in the NASCAR race, but did you see lap 43? Whoa. It's a zero-sum game, dog. You either win or you lose. Do you think Oklahoma would trade places with Auburn right now because Auburn got more yards? Do you think Kentucky who's 3-2, would trade places with Auburn, who's 2-3, because they're top 25 in yards gained and do good in the red zone? No. You either win or you lose. That's all it comes down to. That's life. And right now, Peyton Thorne is the salesman in the office that screws up all the big sales and then wants to train the new guys. You can't have it both ways, but you're stuck with it. And to quote Rascal Flatts and Hugh Freeze, that's what hurts the most, Chris.
Fully expecting Auburn to give their firstborn, if not more, for a quarterback in the transfer portal. That is for darn sure, to your point. We don't have to spend a lot of time, Jake, on the Georgia-Auburn game. I'm assuming you don't see a path to an upset, so we can move on from that. Game of the week. Yeah, game of the weekend.
There's not even a goat path that the hunchback from –
How about
I said that about Kentucky last week, so maybe I can reverse jinx it here. Like, it's like the goat path that SCLDs or whoever it was like, come here, you can trick them.
How about a path to covering 24? I think that would be
probably.
A minor,
look, the funny
victory,
part is Auburn will probably play them close and then blow it. That's what I'm saying.
I was telling somebody the Hugh Freeze special is upcoming where they're going to inexplicably play Georgia closer than they're supposed to.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
Like yeah, good luck. Let's go to the game of this weekend, Jake, as we look at Week 6. Texas A&M and Missouri. This is the only game in college football we got ranked on ranked. 9th-ranked Tigers, 25th-ranked Texas A&M. Thoughts on this one? A&M is a favorite, which I thought was really interesting. Obviously, Mizzou coming off the bye. I'm having a hard time gauging this one, honestly, Jake. Where do you lean in this game?
Not betting it. I can promise you that. There's too many things that can happen. If you're Missouri, here's your chance. Here's your chance. Right? We talked about when are we going to know something more about Missouri? Right? Not that, you give respect to Boston College and Vanderbilt, obviously, who's not your grandfather's Vanderbilt. But Missouri was kind of in the top of tier 2 before the season that we talked about. It was like Missouri, right? Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU. We were wondering who could make that move up to tier 1. And some people even put Ole Miss there, and I could understand that. But Tennessee has now moved up to tier 1. But not that A&M is the best team in the world, but Missouri goes and handles business in this game. We got to start talking about them. Like, hey, okay, this team, defensively maybe even further ahead than what we thought. We know who Brady Cook and Luther Burden and Noel and some of these guys can be. As far as Texas A&M, your hand is forced. You got to play Marcel Reed. You're undefeated with him. I think he gives you the best chance to make plays. And Missouri, when have they struggled the most defensively? Against Boston College and Vanderbilt. What do those two teams have in common? A mobile quarterback, right, that can throw it pretty decent on top of that. He's not just like Taylon Green where you can run and hope that he throws well. So if you're A&M, Marcel Reed gives you the best chance because you might not have the best playmakers around him, but he makes them better, and the defense has to account for more things, right? And he hadn't turned the ball over, which is shocking to say out of a young player. But the matchup I'm looking at is, and us, we like to get into the nitty-gritty, is you got two kind of conflicting styles in a weird circumstance that not a lot of people will talk about. And it's the Missouri run game versus Texas A&M front seven. Texas A&M's front seven, their defensive line loves to get vertical quickly, right? Not that every defensive lineman loves to get in the backfield, but sometimes you tell guys, listen, if you go too far up in the backfield, they're going to trap you, right? Or they want you to do that. Well, A&M, Mike Elko's letting them guys go because it does cause abruptions in the backfield and big-time plays, right? And stuff like that. And I'm talking about the run game, not the pass game, right? Of course you want to get in the backfield in the pass game. But Missouri loves that outside zone, that zone scheme. And when you get upfield too much, that cutback can kill you because it creates layers, right, and levels in your defense, right? It creates that you can cut back on, right? It's not like kickoff where you want to have levels and be able to fall into it. It's kind of different. So I'm very interested to see that match because you could have something where Texas A&M tackles the outside zone for a 2-yard loss on first down and then gets hit for 35, right, on the outside zone to make it a first down. So I think we may see some big plays on both sides in that respect, but it's going to be a fascinating game. And if Texas A&M wins it, I think we got to start talking about them in a little bit of a different light because their one loss was to Notre Dame. It wasn't a conference loss. So this is moving day, right? This is moving day for Missouri and Texas A&M, and I'm fired up to see it. I love watching A&M's linebackers play. Scooby Wilson, all those guys. It's fun watching them. It's going to be a hell of a matchup.
Jake, let's go to that game in Columbia, South Carolina. Gamecocks host Ole Miss, who's looking to bounce back. South Carolina kind of fallen off that national radar since the LSU game, Jake. They had the big win over Akron bye week. Carolina getting another shot at really, I think, making a statement nationally if they can take down Ole Miss. I think a lot of folks are going to be tuning to that game nationally just from the perspective of, well, is Ole Miss going to bounce back? If South Carolina gets the win, again, I think a major statement by Shane Beamer and company be made. I mean, you talked about it a couple weeks ago, Jake, where it was like the stage is set. Here's your opportunity. This is kind of part 2 of that, maybe. I mean, if you look at South, they're getting another big shot to kind of kick that door down and maybe take advantage of an Ole Miss team that maybe has more flaws than they thought. Ole Miss, on the other hand, again, backs against the wall.
Must win.
Matchup. And by the way, Jake, it's not lost on anybody. This is the Juice Wells game. He makes his return to Williams-Brice, and Jake, I'm telling you, it's going to be one of the most toxic, nasty, mean, vitriol-filled atmospheres. And I say that, by the way, as a compliment. It is going to be a madhouse there in Columbia.
Yeah.
Thoughts on this matchup, and can Ole Miss bounce back?
Well, the transfer portal can turn Ole Miss and South Carolina into hated rivals really quick. It's one of the things that it can do. You know, it's funny. I put out I was giving Kentucky their flowers on social media, and I had so many South Carolina fans. They're like, "Why don't we get respect? Why don't you show we beat Kentucky 31-6?" Well, yeah, you did. You did. And you did get respect. Game day came out to Columbia the next week, and you lost. So, like, I don't want to hear, oh, no, you know how you get it? You go beat Ole Miss, right? The reason Kentucky is getting respect is because they almost beat Georgia, and then they went and beat Ole Miss, who a lot of people think was a really good football team. Now, we'll see. They could be fraudulent, as we mentioned. But if you're South Carolina, you're not going to get respect for beating a decent Kentucky team and then losing to LSU when game day comes there. Now, if you beat Ole Miss this weekend, people say, hey, South Carolina, you better put some respect on their name, because not only did they beat Ole Miss, but they beat a Kentucky team that almost beat Georgia and just beat Ole Miss on the road. You got to go earn your respect. And you earn that respect by winning big games, big-time games, not run-of-the-mill games. And that's the last step for South Carolina to start getting that respect. Lenora Sellers is back, right? All the stars are aligning. Ole Miss is going to be licking their wounds, and they're going to be pissed off. They understand what's at stake. So you're not going to get an unprepared Ole Miss team like we saw last week. You're going to have to go earn this one. But South Carolina can. They're good enough to win this game. I think if Lenoris is able to make those big-time plays during the scramble drill like he did against Kentucky. So I don't want to hear any crying about we don't get respect. Go take your respect. Go earn your respect. Closed mouths don't get fed on these SEC streets. Almost doesn't count. This isn't horseshoes and hand grenades. And Shane and y'all deserve it. I think South Carolina fans deserve this win. But just because you deserve something doesn't mean that you're going to get it. So if you look forward, South Carolina, you need this one too. Because you go to Bama next, right? And you play A&M. And I'm trying to remember what game is sandwiched in between that.
At Oklahoma.
It's at Oklahoma. That ain't a walk in the tulips. So if you're South Carolina, the time for talking is done. Like, there is no more talking. Game day went there. You lost, right? You've righted the ship a little bit, even with Robbie Ashford, right, having to take the helm against some lesser competition. But you get a second chance at life here, and a chance to get some much-needed momentum and confidence going to Tuscaloosa, right, in your next game. So if you're a South Carolina fan, this is a huge one. This is the biggest game of the Shane Beamer era, in my opinion.
On the Ole Miss side, Jake, what do they have to do completely differently to take the fight to Carolina and bounce back in the right way? Because, again, to your point, they lose this one, throw that fraudulent word on them. They'll be the biggest disappointment in college football, and we just got in the month of October.
You better block Dylan Stewart first, because and Kentucky, I don't think people realize Kentucky's got NFL players all over that front seven.
They got dogs.
Like, it's legit. They'll have 3 guys going the top 100 picks. Just watch. Oxendine is just, goodness gracious, he puts his hands on you. It's almost catch a manslaughter charge. The offensive line has to show up. You got to protect Jackson Dart. I mean, Jackson Dart was so off rhythm, off timing, and he didn't play great. But it's tough to play great when you don't have time at that position, right? Lane Kiffin, you've got to be a little bit, and it's weird to say this, a little bit more diverse in your play calling. They were unbelievably predictable. It's like they were holding something back. And then on defense, it's the same thing. On third down, Pete Golding never got out of that too high coverage, really, and they were getting killed by the square in on third and passing. Like, they never adjusted. On defense, at some point, you got to think, this game is not going the way we thought. We better make an adjustment. We better make a change, and they never did it. So you better bring your A game on the field and schematically. Like, there's no more, let's save this for a couple weeks. You know, Katie bar the door. You've got to let them know. So Ole Miss has got to go be themselves, mainly, and you've got to take the opponent seriously, which they will now. So it's doable. There's a reason they're a favorite in this game. But if they go out and let South Carolina hang around, and Lenore Sellers is able to create with his legs on third down, not just running, but making a guy miss, keeping his eyes downfield and hitting somebody for a touchdown, Ole Miss could lose this game and practically the season.
Jake, let's go to Fayetteville, Tennessee, Arkansas. Have you been to Fayetteville, by the way?
Never.
I haven't either, and I will be making my first trip this weekend for this game. Looking forward to it. Woo Pig is going to be it's going to be an electric scene. Does Arkansas have a shot in this one to keep it close? Tennessee, a 2-touchdown favorite. Vols, obviously, coming off the bye week. We haven't seen them in a little bit. Just thoughts on this ballgame. Arkansas, again, they're just happy they're not playing in Jerry World this week, if we're being totally honest. So I look at the Hogs as kind of one of those, Jake, dangerous teams of the SEC where they're a roller coaster and you never know when they're going to be in the peak or the valley. But fully expecting Tennessee to win this game. What say you?
Well, Arkansas's offensive line, I don't see it. I even with Taylon Green's running ability, Tennessee is so quick. Like, you're not going to be able to run around Tennessee's defense. And Jaquinta Jackson's a really good back. I just don't know a way in which Arkansas is able to generate any offense to keep them out of third and predictable. And when Taylon Green's in third and predictable, he is going to turn the ball over at some point. He just is. He's not a guy you want to have to throw your way to a win. You need balance with Taylon Green to open up that passing game and make it easier on him to not have to throw guys open consistently. Maybe Arkansas can slow down Tennessee for a little bit. Chris, I just don't see it. I don't, even with Bobby Petrino trying everything possible, this Tennessee defense could be the best in the country. They really could. And if Arkansas's offensive line plays anywhere close to the way that they did, really against A&M and Auburn, it's going to be ugly probably pretty quickly. And I think it's you're seeing the end of the Sam Pittman era right before your eyes, unfortunately. I really don't see how they keep this game very close. And if they do, I think Tennessee has that clutch gene in them, and Nico will end up making the play. The real question is this the game where Nico really explodes, right? Where you really start to see him take that next step, and they're not having to hold anything back with him because of the game flow or circumstance. I just don't see a world in which this one stays close for long.
Jake, we won't spend much time talking Bama Vandy. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, even though, again, this isn't your grandfather's Vanderbilt. I think Diego Pavia and company can, who knows, maybe cook up some magic, but realistically, Alabama's going to win the game. So I want to close with you with this one, that Florida-UCF game that I feel like is going so under the radar. UCF is favored in the swamp.
How? See, what do y'all know? Y'all know something.
Because the line – Florida was favored. It's gone to UCF, and Jake, as a sharp told me one time, if the number crosses the line, you either bet the team it crossed to or don't bet it at all, because to your point, for it to move that much, somebody knows something. So
yeah, it worries me. Like, I almost want to take the over, because if it's the quarterback, right, Graham Mertz or DJ Lagway, I think both teams can score. It's just that movement. Like with Utah, I knew why the line moved a couple weeks ago. Cam Rising wasn't going to play. I'm not going to bet it. If I am going to bet it, I'm going to take the under. This one, I don't know. After the way UCF looked against Colorado, I'm trying. Somebody's got to be hurt. Like, somebody very, very important has got to be hurt. And Gus Malzahn does weird things, believe me. I know better than anybody. They'll come off a loss and play great against somebody they're not supposed to beat, or, in this case, supposed to beat. But Chris, I wouldn't touch this one with a 10-foot pole, but if I did, it'd probably be the over. If Billy loses this one, I think he's fired.
I'm also taking the over, and I would agree with you, Jake. I was about to say, I think I was asked the week of the Mississippi State game, if Florida lost that ball game, would he be fired by Monday? I've always looked at this UCF game as the fired by Monday, maybe fired by Sunday morning game. I just don't think Florida can move forward with Billy Napier if you don't win this one, and it'll be over. Jake, final thoughts, man. Anything else from week 5 or going into week 6 that's really jumping out to you as we move into the month of October, by the way?
I mean, shout out to the undefeateds that we still got out there. I mean, UNLV, maybe Sluka was the problem. That's what we said on Crain Company. He's like, maybe he wanted money. They're like, no, you can't complete passes. And then they put in the other guy, and he's like Dan Marino. Like, maybe they know Barry Odom knows something that we don't. So, or maybe they wanted the money back. JG Wentworth situation. But BYU, man, shout out to those guys. They have totally been the opposite of what I thought they were going to be. Colorado's got a chance to win the Big 12. They do, because the Big 12's down, and Colorado's pretty decent. Better up front than they're growing up front, at least to this point. But it's just, It's been nuts. What's going to happen this week? By the way, I put out a 13-team parlay and hit every one of them except Ole Miss. So I'll never forgive you for that.
Oh, I don't even want to know what the payout was on that.
No, you don't.
No.
You don't.
Jake Crain Company. Those guys do a great job. Jake, let folks know, heck, what's next? What y'all got in the chamber upcoming for week 6 and beyond?
The Chamber of Secrets. No, it's I don't know how we're fitting this all in an hour and a half. We're talking everything college football, a little bit of NFL too. Go to YouTube. It's Crain Company, Crain and Company, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Roku, all that stuff. We have live calls, a live chat. We're diving in deep again today. It's another day of punching the clock and trying to get in as much as we possibly can and interacting with all you guys. So come check us out.
Jake, the man, I appreciate you taking the time as always. We'll do it again
Chris.
next week.
See you, buddy.